Let me start by saying that I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. Today is August 25th, 2022, and this is the part 3 about some thoughts I had about oil. Mostly it's about stock symbol MMTLP, Metamaterials Torchlight Preferred Shares, which is about a company that is, or a subsidiary that's spinning out into a company called Next Bridge. So if you haven't seen my part 1 and part 2 of the thoughts about oil, please check them out. Part 1 is mostly about Canberra Energy, but part 2 talks about Torchlight Metamaterials and Metamaterials Torchlight Preferred Shares. And it's good to check out part 2 before you check out part 3, because I will not be going over what happened in part 2 very much. So on the agenda for this presentation is we'll be talking about some oil prices. We're going to start with John Brda's interview because I think that was seminal, and it's a pivot and a turning point, and it clarified a lot of things. Along with the series, and along with we'll be talking about what the Series A preferred shares are, and MMTLP, and how to calculate how much they're worth, and what the next steps are, what's going on. Okay, so let's start with oil. So this is the price of oil let's see, so this is the price of oil in for the past year or so, going back as far as 2021. If we look, the blue line is the average price of oil. Currently, it's at the time I'm making this video something like $92.75. If we look at the blue line, which is a moving average of 260 days, which is about equal to a 1 year average, that dollar value for oil is around $90.59, or almost $90.60. So the average price of oil is a little over the current price of oil. And if we see if we see the price of oil, it's dipped below the blue line a little bit and come right back up. It's only done this a few times in the past, and when it's done that, the price of oil has gone up significantly. The current price of oil has gone up significantly, and that drags up the overall price of oil. I'm not saying that'll happen in the future. Who knows? Not a financial advisor, and I'm certainly not a fortune teller to be able to tell the future. But that's where the price of oil is right now. Okay. And if you were to buy oil, the reason I want to look at the 260-day or 1 year average price of oil is this is often used as a benchmark for valuation of oil properties and buying of oil assets, and that's where MMTLP comes in. So there was a recording that took place on April 24th, 2022 on Metafam chat. And thank you very much to Syntax Queen of the Metaverse. She set that up, and along that time, John Brda.
Interesting. So we'll see what happens.
John Brda came and he gave a talk about he talked in the Metafam chat. So let's hear what he has to say.
Interesting. So we'll see what happens. The MMTLP thing was a shocker, caught us all off guard.
Yes.
And that there were some mistakes made in that deal, unbeknownst to anybody, quite frankly, that allowed them to trade it. And
But to be fair, I mean, that had never ever happened before, right?
No. It's two market makers got together on the gray sheets, and the only reason they were allowed to do it is because of one word that was in the preferred, and it said transferable.
Oh, wow.
That was it. So, and they also had a CUSIP number, and we also used DTC to distribute it. So it was, they got together and went to FINRA, got a ticker, and went to the gray sheets and used information from 2012 when I was the president of the company, not CEO. And it was just, OTC markets didn't do anything about it. Nobody did anything about it. They don't care. So.
Yeah, I imagine that was a frustrating. I would think maybe a right word, and this is probably bad, but I would imagine it was kind of a clusterfuck when they saw that the MMTLP was trading like holy crap.
I was getting phone calls from my broker and from guys who were close to the deal, And like, are you looking at this ticker? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was actually on a trip to Nashville when it happened, and I saw my 2.2 million shares all of a sudden worth $6.6 million in my account. I was like, oh, okay, how the hell did that happen? So that's when I started to look into it. But yeah, it's the nefarious shit going on, and
Absolutely.
we'll see.
Well, I was
Now,
seeing that TRCH was still trading in some European markets.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
That TRCH was still trading in some European
Yeah,
markets, even still.
I don't know how much it trades over there, and I don't know that they mark, daily trades and what have you. I have no idea, but yeah, it's the interesting thing is that my theory is that MMTLP would have never happened had the books been really balanced on the dividend day. So the brokerage houses, the prime brokers, and these hedge funds never cleared their position, and
Now they're kind of stuck, right?
yep. And so they've they started trading this so they could get people to sell their preferred positions that were in their brokerage account so they could clear out their trade.
exactly.
So
Because the sooner you get rid of it, they can account for it.
that's right. So and it's
Now,
still not
here,
can
we?
I still don't think it's over, to be honest with you.
Oh no, I don't think it is. Now, I do want to know if we can clear this one thing up, since we've got you on the line and you're as official as it gets. And I think this has been made public. If you can't answer it, just say no. You can't answer it. Everything was transferable. You just said that. That means anybody who holds the new shares of MMTLP means that get transferred too, right? They get their dividend.
Yeah, they get their dividend.
Yep. Thank you very much. I needed to hear that. Thank you. You're welcome, Bird.
I'm so glad she unmuted to do that. Do it again, Pig. Do it again.
Yay! No, I've been hiding in office plant mode. I've been just observing in the office plant, listening in, taking notes. And then, so it's like Smokey asked the $1 million question, and we heard it.
Yeah, it's I've seen that on Twitter a lot for a long time. People were concerned about if they bought MMTLP when they're getting their shares, and I know I thought Ken had mentioned something about it before, so I didn't really say anything about it. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of guys buying MMTLP.
So I know a lot of guys buying MMTLP. So hopefully we gained some insight out of that, and we eliminated a lot of FUD. So MMTLP is the Series A preferred shares, and basically what that means is that if you buy MMTLP, you've effectively gotten the benefits of the Series A preferred shares, which means that when those oil and gas assets get sold or spun out or whatever, you will be a beneficiary of that. Okay, that's what came out of that. Also, if you can hear between the lines or intentions that people had, a couple things became very clear to me. They don't plan to repeat the same mistake twice, right? So the spin-out, which is what's being planned now, that will be private. At the time that this video was made, all that they said was that they would either spin out or sell the assets, and it was looking like it was going to be spun out. So, and that's at the time of that Metafam chat, right? So the spin-out will be private, and the spin-out will not be tradable, right? So they don't intend to make the same mistake twice. And that means the shorts will have to exit because you can't short a private company. That would be criminally illegal and otherwise known as fraud. Okay, it would be out and out impossible. You can't just short your neighborhood's ice cream shop because you don't like your neighbor, right? He owns the ice cream shop. You can't short it. That's the way things are. Okay, so same thing with MMTLP, right? When it becomes a private company, you will not be able to short that, and that means the shorts have to close their positions. So on July 15th of 2022, an S1 was filed for Next Bridge Hydrocarbons. That's what the spin-out is called. So the spin-out is going to be called Next Bridge Hydrocarbons. There was some info on Next Bridge Hydrocarbons that hit the web on December 17th of 2021, and it got taken down that same day. And it said that they were looking at a place in the Orogrande Basin, and they suspiciously had about 3.2 billion barrels of oil in there and 134,000 net acres, which was suspiciously very close to what the Torchlight Energy assets were valued at. So everyone kind of, and it was even called the Orogrande Project, which is what it was called for Torchlight. So therefore, everyone believed that Next Bridge Hydrocarbons would be involved in this, in these oil and gas assets. And if we look at the names that were talked about in Next Bridge Hydrocarbons, those names are the same as from the December 17th Next Bridge Hydrocarbons website, right? You've got Clifton Dubois, Kyle Bradford, Delvina Olkers, and Darren Redder, or Rader, I think. I'm really bad with pronunciation, so please forgive me if I've mispronounced those names. The other interesting thing that came about is, if you read the S1 filing, that they say along the way that we satisfied the 2021 drilling obligations in the Orogrande play, and in satisfying our drilling obligations, we identified new potential pay zones not yet discovered in the Orogrande. Okay, basically they're saying there might be more oil and gas than they originally projected, right? So, gee, that's pretty big news. Okay. They also said something else along the way in that S1. I'm not going over the entire S1, but these are 2 points that I think should be highlighted. They also said that, so right now, so as of the filing of that S1, Metamaterials has a 49% ownership of the Orogrande Basin assets, oil and gas lease lands. They have a 49% ownership. So someone else, and we know who they are, own the other 51%, right? So what they intend to do is they intend to make offers and enter into agreements with one or more of the other current working interest owners in the Orogrande, right? So the other people who own the Orogrande project, and they anticipate that they will be giving out shares or exchanging shares. We anticipate offering the Orogrande owners shares of common stock in exchange for their respective working interest in the Orogrande project. Right? The number of shares of common stock necessary such that each participating Orogrande owner would own the percentage of common stock then outstanding in proportion to the percentage owned in the working interest. Essentially, what they're saying is they're bringing the entire Orogrande project together, right, into a 100% ownership. Instead of 49% ownership and then having to split the all the proceeds across all the various partners, they're saying, hey, look, everyone's going to have ownership of this Orogrande. That means that if I have an ownership of MMTLP, which I do, my shares will not be diluted. They will issue more shares, but those shares will be exchanged for interest for the other interest that they do not currently own in the Orogrande project. And that brings the entire Orogrande project under one umbrella, okay? So the additional shares will be exchanged for more of the Orogrande project assets. So in this case, more shares does not equal dilution for MMTLP. And they're going to bring the whole project together, right? There's a lot to be uncovered about the S1 filings. I made 2 videos about that. Please check out the videos. Links will be provided, of course. The first video was about the S1 when it was just filed. It's about a half hour long and goes over it in detail. And the second video answers some frequently asked questions at the time. So I think that should answer most of the questions about what's going on with MMTLP. Which brings me to where we stand today, right? So I believe that NextBridge, when it comes out, is going to be private according to the S1 filings. And the benefit of a private company is it cannot be shorted, right? They're going to not make the same mistake that they made before. And what that means is that all short interest must be resolved before the company goes private. What that basically means is if you're short, you have to close your position. You have to close. And in the case of shorts who've already sold something that they don't own, in order for them to close, they have to buy to close. They have to buy the MMTLP to close, okay? Which means the price of MMTLP could go up substantially, right? Now, there are a bunch of people who are confused about what being private versus being public means. If you're a private company, you still have to hold annual meetings. You still have a board of directors. You're still going to do public filings because even though you're a private company, because you've got lots of shareholders of MMTLP. So there will be filings and they will go out and you will still be able to see them. Okay. And private companies can also pay lots of dividends. There are lots of private companies out there that pay lots of dividends. So you can still make a lot of money with private companies. I'm not saying they're going to. I'm just saying that they could, So the other question, so there were some other questions that were asked by John Brda at that time, around the July 15th timeframe. And at that time, he was very forthright in answering them. So these are two tweets that happened then. These are two questions. Can I hold and get my NextBridge shares? And what happens once I've got those NextBridge shares? So according to John Brda, he says, here are the high points in his opinion. NextBridge will be private, no ticker, no DTC eligibility, but public filings because of the number of shareholders, right? The new management team is super strong and will be developing the field in the near term, right? That management field team is familiar with the Orogrande project because they've been working on it for a long time already, right? You haven't heard of them, but they have been there under the guise of Torchlight Energy, later on under the guise of NextBridge, when NextBridge was dark, and now NextBridge is light. So they've come to light, okay? The new management team will be 100% in charge of the direction of the company. So it could stay private. It could go public later on down the road. Sell out completely. Pay dividends as production allows. All options are on the table for the new management, right? So there's a lot they can do. They don't have to remain private forever. They could sell out completely. They could pay dividends. There's all sorts of things they can do, okay? That leads to some people who are insecure, and they say, hey, look, how can we be sure that these, that the new NextBridge will act in the preferred shareholders' best interest? This are people that they're not familiar with necessarily. So John Brda answers very plainly and simply. He says, all shareholders have rights. If you think they aren't acting in your best interest, vote out the board and elect a new board, and which will hire new management. It's pretty simple, right? That's just the way the world works. So what I'm thinking right now is that after the S1 is approved, the clock starts ticking, right? The short positions have to be closed before the company goes private. And there could be a short squeeze, right? Could there be? Yeah. I mean, I think that it's quite possible. No one can tell you what the future holds, of course. But, could there be a short squeeze? Yeah, quite probably. But again, let me just say, I'm not a financial advisor. And this is not financial advice, okay? So, take that with a grain of salt, okay? So, if this thing is worth a lot, 3.2 billion barrels of oil, how much could it be worth, right? I mean, what kind of levels of capital are we talking about here? Well, that's when I first met Rollerpigeons. I saw her video, and she did a video about how she calculated what she thought might have been what the oil and gas assets of Metamaterials / Torchlight Energy could be worth. Links will be provided, of course. And she did a calculation. So I watched her video several times over to understand her calculation in detail. I also did some other research along the way. There was a really good article by Texas A&M University where they say oil prices lead and land prices follow. Now, the reason I say Rollerpigeons did an amazing piece of work there is that she linked the value of the oil and gas assets directly to the price of oil and not to the amount of land. Most people before, they talk about the amount of land and what the dollars per acre is. So they perform their calculation that way. What Rollerpigeons did is she eliminated the cost of land and went directly from the dollars per barrel of oil and amount of barrels in the ground. And I think that is a much better way to calculate things, because then you don't have to worry about the vagaries of the cost of land, right? Now, the Texas A&M article, that backs up what Rollerpigeons says, right? Because it does a correlation between the price of land and the price of oil, right? So rural oil lands in Texas have a very strong correlation. That means that they have they're very strongly correlated to the price of oil. I mean, so the price of land, rural land in Texas, has a strong correlation to the price of oil, right? If there's oil in the land, then that's what you're buying, right? Here are the references. Again, links will be provided, of course, but check it out. There's also one other thing that was important, I thought. One other reference is how much does it cost to pull oil out of the ground? And there was a Wall Street Journal article which breaks down the barrel breakdown of oil. How much does it cost to pull oil out of the ground? Specifically, I was interested in U.S. shale because that's the type of oil that we have in Texas, and also U.S. non-shale, right? So we have both shale and non-shale. If you click on these, you'll see that the shale price comes up, and we also get the shale price comes up, and we see that the shale price in total, when you add in everything, is about it's under $24 a barrel. Okay. The non-shale price is about $21, is under $21 a barrel, right? But this article was done a while back, so we're talking $21 to $24 in 2016. Since then, there's probably inflation and whatnot, right? So let's say the COGS cost of oil today is about $35 a barrel, right? Because as we know, under President Biden, we've recently had an interesting amount of inflation. And in fact, they're even passing an Inflation Reduction Act, which to try to make the price, to try to make inflation less strong. But we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, I'm going to say the COGS cost for oil is around $35 a barrel here. Okay, but back in 2016, it was around $21 to $24 a barrel. Okay, so if we take the average price of oil over the last year, which remember I said was around $90 a barrel. And we subtract the COGS cost, which is around $35 a barrel, we get a gross revenue of $55 per barrel. Okay. When oil is in the ground and has not been pumped out yet, there's about a 12% a discount to the price of oil, right? So that $55 per barrel of gross revenue drops down to something in the range of $6.60, right? Because you don't have the oil yet; it's still in the ground, right? You have to pump it out. And then there's, of course, the 49% revenue interest that I mentioned earlier that Torchlight Energy had, which became Metamaterials. So they don't have all of the revenue interest of all of that oil. They only have a 49% revenue interest, which drops the dollars per barrel down to $3.23. As we can see, costs are adding up. But there's 3.2 billion barrels of oil. Let me say that again. There's 3.2 billion barrels of oil, and $3.23 per barrel. The value of that is worth around $10.348 billion. Okay. Now, let's say they do a tax-free spin-out, which basically means they'll do a stock swap with a major oil company in exchange for these assets. So then they can do it in a tax-free way. So then you only got to pay basically the underwriter fee. Say that brings you down to about $9.3 billion valuation for all that oil. Okay. And we know that Metamaterials holds now, since the Next Bridge S1 filing has been done, 165 million shares of common stock of Next Bridge Hydrocarbons, and that Next Bridge Hydrocarbons is what will, is a division, right? So we'll take that $9.3 billion divided by 165 million shares. That means that the dividend per share works out to something like $56.27. Not a bad chunk of change there. It's a good thing they got 3.2 billion barrels of oil. So how do we know this calculation makes sense? How do we know it's it's not just pie in the sky? Well, earlier in 2021, there was a company called ConocoPhilips. They're a big major oil producer, and they bought some oil land in Texas. They paid $9.5 billion, or about $42,000 per acre, which is what they reported. And they talked about adding 200,000 barrels a day of production there, right? So how much oil is that? Well, it's hard to say. But if we take 200,000 barrels a day, multiply that by 365 days a year, you get about 73 million barrels per year, right? And if you got 25 years of production, let's just say, that's about 1.825 billion barrels of oil. That's less oil than we have over here in the Orogrande Basin. But anyway, in either case, if you only operate Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, you're pumping oil instead of 7 days a week. That means that you're getting something like 52 million barrels a year out of the ground. 25 years of production, you're somewhere around 1.3 billion barrels of oil. So we are somewhere between 1.8 to 1.3 billion barrels of oil. Okay, and this was dated around September 21st, 2021. So if we take that date and we look at the price of oil at that time, we can see that the price of oil was around, what is it? Around $70.68 per barrel, right? The 1 year average for oil was much lower, of course. It was around $58 a barrel, okay? But we know that the COGS cost of oil was around $23, so we can do that same calculation, right? So we take $69, enter it into the spreadsheet, take the COGS cost, make that $25 because it was much earlier. We didn't have the Joe Biden inflation tax yet. So the gross revenue would be a bit higher. It's around $44 a barrel back then. The value of oil in the ground, again, 12%. That means dollars per barrel is about $5.28. Revenue interest in this case would be 100%, right? So we're talking about $5.28 per barrel. And they get about 1.8 billion barrels of oil, we'll say, right? And if you do that calculation, it works out that oil in the ground is worth something like $9.5 billion. Well, $9.5 billion is what ConocoPhilips said that they spent on that deal. So I'm saying that calculation at least makes somewhat sense there, right? I mean, it works out there. So I like the methodology that Rollerpigeons has in developing, in correlating the price of oil to the price of oil and gas assets, right? In Texas, at least. So that works out. Okay. But so the question I have is, what happens if the price of oil changes, right? I mean, if the price of oil is a particular, I don't want to have to redo this calculation all the time. So it's easier for me to visualize it and make it into a spreadsheet. So we take that same calculation that we have, the $90 calculation, which works out to $56.27 per share dividend valuation, and we add some columns at $95, $100, $105, $110, $115, and we can see that the dividend per share increases. Going through the same exact math, right? Goes up all the way up to $81.85 at $115 per barrel. So let's add some more blank columns, make some room, fill in some columns for some lower prices, like, go down to $65 a barrel. And actually, let's just fill out the whole spreadsheet from $40 up to $150, because we've seen the price of oil go as high as $130 in the last year or so, right? All within the last year. So this becomes this becomes a spreadsheet for the valuation of the dividend per, in terms of dollars per share. It's not saying that you will get that dollars per share, but that's what the valuation would be in terms of dollars per share. And we turn those numbers into this chart, right? So this is just a chart of those numbers. On the x-axis, you see the dollars per barrel for oil. And on the y-axis, you'll see the valuation of the dividend. And it's in a bar chart format, right? So this is the estimated value of dollars per share, assuming that you have a non-taxable event, right? And the final dividend is likely to be a stock swap, right? So you'll get the dollars per share value, but you won't necessarily be getting, dollars in a dividend. To that spreadsheet, to that chart, I put in the settings used in the spreadsheet so that we can tell what's going on. So we put in the COGS cost, estimated reserves, everything, all that, right? And the number of shares, which is 165 million in this case, because NextBridge added a million shares or so. And we have that final chart, which is the one that I'm using, which calculates how much the NextBridge dividend is likely to be worth, in my opinion, of course, right? Again, we've seen that the price of oil has been increasing. The 1 year average has been $90, has now crossed the $90 per barrel And the price of oil actually hit the 1-year average and came back up. So that indicates that it's probably going to be going up some more. The current price of oil is $92.80. If we put that into the charts and we see where that falls, we see that at $92, we're between the $90 and the $95 price point, right? $92.80. And the 1-year average is around the $90 price point. So I'm thinking that the valuation of the MMTLP dividend should be in the range of between $56 to $61, somewhere around there, right? So that's where that valuation comes from. And thanks to Rollerpigeons for doing the initial math and coming up with the formulation. That is key and pivotal. So great job. So where are we next? So where are we now? What's next? What should I do? What should I do with them? Should I sell? Do I go private? I mean, it's all confusing. A lot of people are asking these questions all over the place. And the only answer I have to that is, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not your financial advisor, and I'm not giving you financial advice. This video is for information and entertainment and educational purposes only. All that said, it might be a good idea to ask yourself some questions, right? Like, at what price would I be happy to sell my MMTLP shares, right? Because it might go there before the company goes private. You never know. Not only that, NextBridge, they could sell the assets to a major oil company, or they could partner with that oil company to develop those assets, meaning they could pump and sell oil. How would you feel about that? Do you trust NextBridge management, and do you want to hang out with them? Because if they're pumping oil, instead of that 12%, they're getting 100% out, right? Or at least 50% if they're partnering with someone, right? That's a lot better than 12%. So the question is, how do you feel about NextBridge management? Yeah, you might want to go with NextBridge. It's not necessarily a bad thing. All that said, the S1 was filed on July 15th. So, so if we look at when it was filed and we look at today, it's been a week, 10 days, 15, 20, 25. Right now, it's the 25th of August, which means it's been 29 days or so, right? So I'm expecting that we will be hearing some news about NextBridge, about that NextBridge S1 filing coming out soon. Don't know when, but I'm expecting it really real soon. Whether or not it's the SEC has found some things they'd like changed, and Metamaterials will make those changes, or whether or not the SEC is happy with everything that's been filed and says, hey, go ahead, sounds good. We'll find out, right? But I'm expecting some info soon about that, right? So what is the timeline? The timeline is, here's what I see as a timeline, right? We have the S1 filing. We got to wait for the S1 to be approved. There might be a short squeeze after it's been approved because there'll be a limited amount of time before NextBridge goes private. And when it goes private, you can't have short shares. That means the shorts have to close. And then after it goes private, maybe Next Bridge Hydrocarbons will, at that point, announce some plans, right? Are they going to be selling the assets? Are they partnering with a major oil producer? What's going on, But right now, we have the S1 filed, and we're waiting for the S1 approval. We're very close to it, I think. But, we're still in the stage between the S1 filing and the S1 approval. A short squeeze could still be coming up, right? All that said, holding on to any stock is hard. In particular, we've seen short attacks. We've seen FUD come out. We've seen people, we explained the story to various people. And a lot of them are saying, hey, how can such an awesome opportunity be coming along, right? They can't believe that life could ever throw good things their way, right? We've seen delays in the sale of the assets, right? We've seen expenses that come up, like the continuous drilling clause, and the obligations. They have to drill the oil, right? So they have to pay for drilling the oil, and they have to drill the oil, of course, right? But all in all, we've seen a lot of people who want your shares, and they want your shares for little or no money. So if you make a bunch of money out of this, all I got to say is you deserve your gains, because you've gone through a lot of pain. Okay? I know it sounds corny, but it's true. I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of, if you held on through all this time, pat yourself on the back because you deserve all the profit that you will get. Okay. All that said, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. These are my thoughts about oil and specifically about MMTLP / NextBridge. Okay. And it is August 25th, 2022. And with that, I will say good night. Goodbye.